Transportation. 7:40, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Agenda passes. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the August 26th meeting.
Motion to approve the April 26th meeting. Is that August?
August 26th. Did I say April? Oh, okay.
We'll approve the August one.
Okay, well, August 26th, 2020 meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the CAC Diversity Facilitator, the scope of work proposal with Dr. Tracy Strickland.
Yeah. Dr. Strickland. Good morning. Dr. Strickland is here. She has spoken, and I believe that the board chair, vice chair, and Dr. Houlihan all were on a conference call with Ms. Lee and to talk about what the board was looking for as part of this project. And Dr. Strickland has been able to get a scope of work as well as a quote, which was included in your materials. And I think she's going to walk through it today. Staff's recommendation would be that we take this to the board at the October 6th meeting and for approval. Dr. Strickland, if you can take that.
Yes, ma'am. So having spoken with Christina Lee and Yvette Hall, her partner, and them walking me through the different phases of their proposal, of course, at first, they'll be meeting with the full committee. The hope is to be able to do that in person, with one of the partners being able to be face-to-face and the other one to be remote. After that, they'll be working individually with different groups, the staff of UCPS, then the faith partners, then the students. She's asked that I be with her when she's meeting with students, just so that there's a UCPS person present, kind of as a supervisor, I guess, just for safety's sake. And then meeting back with the full committee, excluding the students at that point, knowing that as they build trust in the different groups, the students might have some problems speaking up at first. And so bolstering their confidence separately before they put them together. Then in phase 2, talking about the beginning of building strategies, working with larger groups, the building of different strategies to present to you all. And then phase 3 is pulling everybody together and putting all of those opportunities in front of the whole group, allowing different groups to speak to each other throughout the process so that they can gain some insight into what they've all come up with and formulating a joint plan. And then also she will be working with one of the committee members to be determined to co-present to the board what the recommendations are from the committee.
I just want to share with the committee that it was very exciting for me personally to have a Zoom meeting with both of them. I guess it was a few weeks ago, but after meeting them, I felt like we were in person. But after meeting with both individuals, I was ready to get started. I think everyone's going to be extremely happy to work with them. But I don't have any questions about, their recommendation.
Yeah, sounds like you have a pretty good plan in place.
Are we engaged in the statement of work with a corporation, or I thought there was an individual as the head of leading up this effort?
So it is her and her partner that own this agency, this consulting agency. And she has asked throughout the work if both of them could work together on this. They work in all of their work, they do that together. And so she asked for permission to do it that way.
So just to be clear, Joe, we met with Christina Lee, who is the lead, and that is the resume and everything that we saw last month.
Yes.
And the person that helps her in the office is Yvette Hall. And so Kathy and I and Dr. Strickland and Dr. Houlihan were able to Zoom with both of them, with Mrs. Lee, obviously being the lead person.
Well, it's not so great. It's not so great because that should have been known up front that there'd be, somebody else working with her, because we needed to scrutinize that person as well. So I mean, it's almost as if we're going to get 2 for 1. Then the 2 should have been there in the beginning. This. I'm a little uncomfortable simply because I didn't read anything in her bio that indicated that somebody else would be coming with her. So we need to be careful of that in the future. We need to know the total package of who's coming, so that we can, scrutinize the total package. And there's really no defending that, simply because it's almost like if she knew that she was going to have somebody that close to her as a team, and you use the word partner, that should have been known. I'm not saying that she misled anyone. I'm just simply saying that should have been known.
I hear what you're saying, Reverend Benson, but to the best of my knowledge, every consultant that we've ever worked with has always had someone with them to help them. Even when we went through realignment with Dr. McKibben, he had a partner that came with him that did the GIS and the mapping for him. And you were on that committee, right?
And that's why I know that we knew about that from the beginning. So, this is an easy fix. This is just something of this magnitude. We just needed to know all the players and the participants.
Well, no, you knew it as a committee member, but as a board member, our contract was with Dr. McKibben. And so by the time it got to you in the committee, we brought in his partner, Mr. Cropper. And then I think we've had other consultants come in. I think it's very rare that a consultant would be working solo without any help. But I hear what you're saying. But Christina Lee is the person, and the person in her office that does work with her, because I believe she also works with the Mint Hill Police, correct? And she is absolutely, the lead person, but Mrs. Hall, does work with her. And if that is a concern, we could ask for them to send over information for Mrs. Hall, if you would like to see some of her background, but the contract would be with Christina Lee, right?
Well, as I read it, the contract is with Paradigm 360.
A Paradigm 360, correct.
And I think what I hear Mr. Benson asking, and this is, we can certainly do this moving forward, is as we review entities, vendors, individuals, ask a few more questions to dig a little deeper to find out who else might be associated with that and with that group. I think it's just kind of digging a little bit deeper maybe than we did, assuming that it was one individual. And I think moving forward, that's a lesson we can learn, and we can certainly adapt to that, sir.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you get a contract, is there going to be any subcontractors involved or something like that? So, I mean.
I know when
Absolutely.
we hired the consultant out of Georgia for the strategic planning, or the strategic plan, that wasn't just her. She had other people in her office that came with her and helped facilitate when we put together our strategic plan. So just from my point of view, I guess that's why I didn't see a difference.
And I think that as she began to understand more and more what the scope of work was, that became apparent that it would be helpful to her to have her partner with her, Yvette Hall being her business partner. And she asked for permission for Yvette Hall to join in the Zoom meeting that we had with Mrs. Merrill and Mrs. Heintel. And at that time is when it started to develop that it would be both of them.
And that's the word that sparked me, was partner. Not, I knowingly knew, reading her resume, that when she came, she's going to have helpers, right? A helper ain't a partner. A partner is another person. Now, is this person going to be getting paid?
That I'm assuming that they'll both be paid through the business.
Through the business.
But
You see what I'm saying?
an
So we're
hourly
hiring
fee.
the business, which means we're hiring two people. We're not hiring a person, then they're bringing staff. We're hiring this company, which now consists of more than just one person. So as Dr. Houlihan indicated, next time around, we just need to have a fuller picture of what we're partaking in.
Would you like for Christina Lee to send us some information on Yvette Hall for you to review?
No, what I'm going to do is take your judgment on that.
Oh, okay.
You deemed her appropriate. You said you felt good about it. So I'm going to adhere to the chair's
Okay.
wisdom on that. But at the same point, going forward,
Point taken.
we need to make sure
Okay.
that we know who all. Because see, now we're paying two people, not
Well,
one.
It's one contract,
Yeah,
so-
but two people getting paid from it.
right?
'Cause
But
they're
I can
partners.
assure you this contract is compared to other contracts that we have.
Oh, I'm not worried about the contract. It's the
I mean, the
principle.
fact that we can get two professionals for this is quite wonderful. Especially considering the two people that we met with. I'm completely.
But that's why I'm falling on your wisdom. on
Sure.
that. I'm just making sure that we protect ourselves.
Mhm.
in the
Point
future.
taken. I got you. Thank you.
Could we get a bio on Yvette also, just to have? I mean, that'd be good. I mean,
Sure. If they want, I can rely on the chair. But if you need to see
no, I would
something,
like a bio just to
Yeah.
have it. I mean, we
Absolutely.
got what's the other lady's name?
I think you'll
But-
be
Yvette
really
Hall.
impressed.
I'll be glad to
Yeah,
get
okay,
that.
yeah, we got the other one's bio and everything. It'd be good to have both of them. But she's
I'll
going
be
to
glad to
be
get that to you.
partnering. I think it'd be good.
but just know that I myself would have relied on you.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, I need a motion to send this to the October 6th meeting for full board approval.
I
Actually, before we move that forward, I did have one follow-up from Ms. Strickland.
She's coming back now.
Is she still there?
Yeah, she's coming back. Just for you.
Yes, sir.
So reading through this statement of work, I see that, we're getting to a certain point, where it sounds like the committee is basically able to, form to kind of have the direction. Once that happens, how do you proceed? So once this statement of work is complete, what do we see as the next step, beyond these phases outlined?
I think, Mr. Moriel, what I'm looking at is at the end of the whole time in which the committee meets, one of the end outcomes I'm looking for, and I think maybe the board is a series of recommendations on moving forward. As an example, would this committee recommend that the committees continue to convene beyond the scope of this work without the consultant present? with possibly committee chairs leading, that work as needed. Would there be specific strategies we should implement that tie back to our strategic plan? I mean, what I'm looking for, I don't want this committee to just meet and talk. That's going to be part of it, but I'm looking for some tangible outcomes that the board and the administration can rely upon to move the district forward. So once the board approves the contract and once we get this thing going, I hope that makes sense to you, Joe. That's kind of what I'm looking for as superintendent, are a series of outcomes that say, in order to move forward, here are 3 to 5 strategies you should consider.
And
It was clear the scope coming to basically a report and recommendations, and then I was unclear on what it was like after that, but thank you for that further direction. That's great.
And ultimately, we will want a plan or some type of document, and that would be a living document going forward. So being in the future, stuff might change, it get updated or what have you.
So, the conversation that we had in our Zoom call, we did explain to her the process we went through for the Citizens Advisory Committee on realignment. And we shared with her, the process of bringing community members in so that she could understand what would be helpful and what our thought processes were for a Citizens Advisory Committee on diversity, bringing community members in. And we shared with her that, periodically we did bring in, throughout the process, we would have like public meetings to kind of get outside of the group and bring more information back in. I don't know if you remember that with the realignment committee, we had some public postings after a few meetings. And we shared with her that the ultimate goal through that process was that they would bring a recommendation at the end to the full board. And again, to be able to bring a recommendation for diversity, with all of those different opinions, and then to be able to line that up with our living document, the strategic plan, which is hard to believe we're almost at 2022. But so that's going to have to be updated at some point. But that was something we did communicate to her that, we would be expecting them at the end of this to bring some type of recommendation to the full board.
Is there any more discussion on this?
I'm good. Thanks.
All right. All right, that being said, I need a motion to send this to the full board.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right, motion passes. Be sent to the full board at the October 6th meeting. Next item on the agenda is the Parkwood mascot update with Michelle Morris.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I wanted to bring this issue, an issue regarding the Parkwood mascot to the board for clarification. The committee began its work and was getting ready to provide recommendations on mascot options to the board. And staff became concerned as to whether the board was interested in them presenting a mascot or was expecting them to present a mascot that was able to use the sword and shield that is currently in place as the, I'm going to call it the graphics for not having a better word, the logo for the mascot, and or whether they were able to pick something that would not facilitate the ongoing use of that logo. And going back and listening to the board meeting, Mr. Morial's motion was that we were just removing the mascot. And so I guess I'm sorry, the rebel name. And so I guess the issue was that removal of was that removal of rebels and allowing them to be free to do anything, or was that removal of rebels and still to use the sword and shield? And so before the committee could come to you with information, we felt it was important to get clarification from the board as to what your expectations were.
I
Yeah,
like
so
the
being the
fact,
one that provided the motion, I guess I could provide some clarity on that. So you're right. I went back and watched the meeting as well. Ms. Sturdivant made an initial motion to remove the name as well as the mascot name as well as the logo. I had originally, she made an original motion, which I seconded. Once she made clear that it was to remove the logo as well, I withdrew my second. And then I offered a motion to just change the Rebels name. So my intent was not to withdraw the logo and to, by any means possible, be able to utilize that same logo in an effort to keep costs minimal in reducing and changing the mascot for the school. I think I said that a sword and I think it's a shield, a P and a sword should not be offensive to anybody, and recommended that we try to utilize that. While my motion was to just change the Rebels name, that was my intent, was to also try to utilize that logo in any means possible. Does that provide clarity?
Yeah, I think it does. I guess from my perspective, with any means possible, does that mean that they have to or not? And I guess that's the question. For me, with any means possible may leave it open. And I hear Mr. Helms saying, no, it doesn't mean you have to use it. And I guess that's what I want clarification on, so that the committee does not bring something to you all that displeases the board.
So
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I have watched this meeting 6 or 7 times. And I'm happy to hear Mr. Morial's intent, because just speaking for my vote, when I voted to get rid of the name Rebels, I was not voting to get rid of the sword and the shield, because one thing that we did not discuss very much in that meeting is that we had been provided 2 cost options. What it would cost if, in Ms. Sturdivant's words, have a clean start, get rid of the P and the sword, get rid of the Rebels, and start from scratch. And we were given an estimate of $182,000. And then if we kept the P and the sword, Mr. Morial said that, although he said in his motion it was to drop the name Rebels, because that is specifically the emails we were receiving. The emails that we were receiving were that the name Rebels was offensive. And Mr. Morial said in the meeting that he did not think the P and the sword was offensive per se, and that that they could choose a mascot to go with the P and the sword to keep cost down, which we've been given an estimate that would be, somewhere between $75,000 or $67,000, because we did get an update that we might be able to bring that down. So just speaking for myself, when I heard Mr. Morial withdraw his second from Ms. Sturdivant, because she wanted to, get rid of all of it and let the school have a fresh start. When I voted for Mr. Morial's motion, I was under the impression that we were going to keep the costs low, get rid of the name only, Rebels, and let the school choose a new name to replace Rebels to keep the costs down.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that concept, because there's nothing, the image of rebels that were in the minds of those that wanted it gone was red and white and all those kinds of colors. And it seemed as though that when they changed the mascot to what it is today, they went way opposite of that. And if you go back to the Civil War, they actually, in a sense, chose the colors of the other side. And so those are very great colors, and it's a very great logo for them to have. And now they get a chance to get a name to go with that, because and I'm not even talking about it from a cost standpoint. I'm talking about it from, they've already made movements to move away from what folks declared offensive, and so the only thing that was left was the name.
I would agree with that, Reverend Benson, because it is my understanding, and I could absolutely be wrong, but it is my historical understanding, talking to a couple of our county commissioners who are alumni of Parkwood. It was my understanding that in 2009, when this was addressed, that was a compromise that both parties made, and I'm under the belief that the P and the sword and the new colors are new. They are not related at all to the old name Rebels. So I can only speak for my vote, but in the spirit of Mr. Morial's language throughout the meeting on keeping the P and the sword, and that it wasn't offensive, and then all the emails that I had received was regarding the name, not the logo. And I thought and I think Mr. Morial even said a couple of times in the meeting that he thought the P and the sword were very tastefully done, and that it could be used moving forward. And so that's how I voted, and I'll just let someone else speak.
Yeah, because the P and the sword is an issue. We got some issues with some other schools also. But going forward, I don't want to hamper the school if they want to do a wholesale change. But from my perspective, I would like to keep the P in the shield logo or sword, just for keep the cost down, keep a lot of the uniforms, spirit wear all the same.
Yeah, and it's a huge deal. And again, for me, it ain't got nothing to do with the cost. It's got to do with the fact that movement has already been made to get away from that. So let's not associate the color scheme and the the logo that they have now with that. You just you come up now. You can come up with a name to go with those designs, because this takes an emotional toll. That community there is being rocked. Now, some of us may consider it, well, you should have never had the name in the first place, but being that that's the name that they had, and a lot of those folks didn't grow up saying Rebel, thinking about Johnny Reb, that was the name of their school. But when you put historical context to it, they began that process. The one thing that they didn't do was take away the name. So now they got a chance in a sense to complete the whole picture. But if the community wants that, obviously that would be their decision. But they got great colors, they got a great design, and now they can come up with a great name.
What I would recommend, to the board members, Mr. Morial, Hams, and Reverend Benson, what I would recommend, it sounds like the spirit of the vote the intent of the vote. And Mr. Morial's motion was to keep the P in the sword because it was not connected. I think it was
It was an option to keep the P in the sword if they wanted to.
right. And so I think, Mrs. Morris, what I think I'm hearing is that the intent of the board was for them to keep the P in the sword. But I think you also commented in the meeting that they would come back to us with their recommendation. So, you know, the board is in charge of managing taxpayer money. And so I think I would communicate, it needs to be communicated that our hope and our intent, the spirit of our vote was to get rid of the name Rebel. And that Mr. Morial did withdraw his second when Mrs. Sturdivant said she wanted to get rid of the logo and the name Rebel. And then he offered his own motion, and her motion failed. But if they want to come back to us because they don't feel like that they can keep the P in the sword, then they're going to have to present that argument on why they would be asking the board to spend $180,000 or $200,000 to replace it. And then the board, maybe we would have to send it to the finance committee to see if we even have that in the budget, or if that would have to be spaced out over many years to honor their wish. But I would encourage them to use what they've got, because it is a very attractive logo. And like Reverend Benson said, it's the polar opposite of, you know, the term rebels and the colors that are associated or come to mind when you think about the name rebels. So I would encourage the school to be very thoughtful about what they work on during a pandemic when we're still operating under a 2018 budget. And they need to consider the mascot and what they're going to be asking for. And then I would also say that they're going to have to decide if they need to go to the community members or donors or their booster club if they want to make up the difference, because again, I think the intent was that we were willing to put forth maybe $74,000 or $75,000 at the meeting to help them get rid of the name Rebels. But if it does end up costing $182,000, the community, if that's what the school wants to do and that's the recommendation they bring to us, they would have to make up the difference or help us facilitate that if we don't have it in the budget. And again, that would probably have to go to finance and then to the full board for a decision.
As much as I like the logo and I spoke to that, at the same time, we told them to come back. So we don't want to hamper them either. We don't want to put such restrictiveness on that to where it's not their decision. This needs to be their decision. The school, the community, the Parkwood family, they need to come. And all I did was just express that what they have as a logo now is an awesome logo. But if they, and this is what I want to say to Michelle to relay back to them, is that they are free. That they are free. They shouldn't worry about cost. They shouldn't worry about any of those things. What they should worry about is coming up with something that they all agree with, that's satisfactory to them. They then present it to us. We deem it satisfactory, and then we move forward. You know, we don't want to strangle we're asking this community to look into their hearts and their souls and literally revive themselves. So the last thing we need to do is ask them to do that, then say, but here's your restrictions.
And also asking them to go to the booster club to come back with more money is almost like a slap in the face, to be honest. I mean, they've
Right.
lost a lot of boosters. I know that. I mean, going forward. So
What I meant by
Yeah.
booster club was like uniforms and stuff, because do booster clubs help with all the uniforms, or is that the responsibility of the district? That's where I was coming from. I mean, because, and if you want to see the list of everything, but I I've been part of the Piedmont Booster Club, and I've been part of the Porter Ridge Booster Club. And I know that we rotate getting new uniforms on a cycle. So that's where I was coming from, as far as I was not attempting to be offensive to anyone by mentioning the Booster Club, because I've been part of two, and I thought that they did have some skin in the game.
Well, they have skin in the game from the standpoint of support, and they do, raise money to help the schools. But I just want Michelle to take back to them that you all are free to think, deliberate, design, draw up, propose, and then you bring it to us. Don't you be uninhibited. Don't you be inhibited. You be uninhibited, and then we'll make the decision, but you just be free in your methodologies. Just make sure you involve all the stakeholders, so that when you say this is coming from Piedmont, it's coming from Piedmont. I mean, Parkwood is coming from Parkwood.
And that's
and the
another
whole family of
That's
Parkwood.
another concern I have, is that I'm aware of the two names they're considering, and quite frankly, they don't conjure up Parkwood at all to me. I think about NC State. And so I'm a little bit concerned about the two names they're offering, because I really was hoping that this would be something awesome for the Parkwood community. I had heard names like Rough Edge or Rough Edgers. I had heard like Raptors or Buccaneers, Gladiators.
Patriots also, which would
Pa-
make a lot of sense going back historically.
And but they didn't want to have that it was too close to Rebels or whatever. So I am a little shocked by the two names that these 10 committee members were. And I know that I have spoken with Mrs. Heintel, and she had a grave concern that only 10 people were making this decision for the entire community, because there's 10 people on the committee.
And it's my understanding it was supposed to go to the community with the process, and I haven't seen anything go to the actual community.
Well, I think
feedback.
I'll let Mrs. Morris address that.
Yeah, the process so far has been, they sought input from the entire community. They put out information, and they received a lot of feedback from a variety of names. The committee has met multiple times, and this is a committee that's got students, school, teachers, administrator, a community member. Okay. But it's got a teacher, administrator, community member, site-based team is represented, student represented, right? So they've met, took that into consideration, and discussed their options. They were about to put a survey out to the student body, and when the options that they were considering did not reflect using the sword and the P, that's why I stopped the process, so that the board could give them feedback, because I was concerned that it didn't appear that it appeared, from what I'm hearing from the administration, is that they wanted a clean break, and that the P and the sword was, to some people, not a clean break. And so that's why I asked them to hold, so that we could have input from the board, because I did not want them going down a direction that was not, I didn't want them to bring two ideas to you when you all go back to this, because I didn't want the community to have that discussion.
So I thought it was the committee members that had been meeting. Could you explain to us what the committee, how the committee got feedback from the community? Because I've had community members message me that they haven't been able to provide input.
I know there was stuff on social media. There was requests from the community to provide input. I can find out exactly from the principal where that went. I know that she put out to the community, like I said, she told me that they did a blast out through social media, through their website, those things, to have people provide input, and they got lots of different ideas for names.
And you live in Parkwood and you haven't seen this?
I haven't. I'm not on social media, so
Oh.
I mean that might be part of the problem also. But I haven't seen anything. I have kids at Parkwood Middle and Prospect, and I don't
And they
think I've received
haven't?
anything from either of them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm concerned the community has not had a chance to chime in, but if they have,
Bit more color too. I mean, this was a pretty spirited meeting. So in making my motion after Ms. Sturdivant's motion was made, my intent was, again, to try by every means possible to utilize the current logo. We had already gone through the effort. So all of this was shared with us during the meeting that in 2009, there was an effort made to change, there was a figure of a human in a, Confederate uniform type logo that was removed. The new logo was put forth. So seeing the fact that we've already paid for it once, it was not offensive to anybody. The intent was not to provide direction to drop that as well. But instead, in my clarifying comments, it was to try to utilize that logo. And I believe there are options out there that allow them to utilize the logo. A quick search on Google, there's some that are very tasteful, that are very meaningful to today's day and age. One I throw out there would be, a company called Grant Thornton, a consulting company, launches something called the Purple Paladins. And, it says that Grant Thornton views modern day paladins, which is, a knight, as leading champions of a cause. I mean, does it get much better than that in today's day and age? So, I guess having more options than just the middle school mascot or a college name. And Paladins is also Furman's name, and it starts with a P. It has a nice little flow with Parkwood. Just certain examples like that. I mean, I agree, Raiders, probably not the best one, seeing what that stands for, but there's options out there to utilize the logo that still give them a clear break from the Rebels name and saves the taxpayers money.
I think the freedom of them being able to deliberate and choose and select would at least be some sense of consideration to the community. So we'll ultimately make our decision, but let them be as free and deliberative in that process. And if I'm hearing correctly that the community is not totally involved, you may want to bring back to them to make sure that they have as wide as net cast within the community as possible.
So I think they should come back with a lot of options for us, because ultimately we will decide what it will end up being.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, there's no more discussion about that. Moving on, we have the technology, the electronic form platform with James Parker and Michelle Morris.
Good morning. I'll just tee this up for Mr. Parker. I guess over the summer, we began looking into electronic form process so that parents could access our forms electronically, sign them electronically, and we would reduce the paper that goes back and forth and better able to track documentation. And coincidentally, Mr. Morial was thinking on the same wavelength as staff and suggested that we look into this. And so since we were already doing that, we were much more quickly able to be able to present this to the committee. And we have one vendor that we've used for our athletic forms, and then we have another vendor that we've used for, as you all know, Scribbles, which we use for our enrollment and transfer process and all of that. And so we have the Scribbles proposal here for you because it was much more fiscally, was a much more inexpensive option. So
Fiscally responsible.
Yes.
fiscally responsible, yes. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Parker to go into more detail.
Thank you, Ms. Morse. Good morning. As Ms. Morse mentioned, we have been exploring some options for delivering electronic forms for our schools, and we started this back in the summer. This process would help schools with the paper forms that send home to parents that need to complete those and return them to schools, and then update our documentation. On the table is our proposal from Scribbles. And as you can notice, and I'll explain this to Mr. Morial, there's 6 modules with Scribbles. Currently, we are enrolled in 3 of them and entertaining the 4th one. It starts at the top with just Scrib and Roll. Mr. Morial, that's where electronic enrollment is in K through 12. Scrib Choice is where the school choice module is. The 3rd one on the right is our proposal for connection forms. That is the one that Ms. Morse was alluding to. It's an inexpensive cost. It takes about 60 days to ramp up from beginning to end. The hardest part would be defining the forms and which ones need to be put into this platform. But parents would access the same existing platform using the username and password, complete the form. It would automatically update into PowerSchool, which is a big plus. They already have an agreement with PowerSchool. The other modules are Scrib and Roll, Scrib Online, which does electronic storage of documents. We do not need that. We have plenty of storage in our district for keeping information. The other Scrib Order, which is our transcript platform, that gives you that information. Then we have the transfer process for Scrib Transfer. That just transfers records from one school to another. PowerSchool already has that encompassed, so will not be needed. But just to explain the modules, this one is our best cost in our proposal for to bring to as a solution and let the committee talk about it. But it allows us to put in 5 forms. We can put more, but the initial scope was 5 forms. And includes a $750 monthly fee for transfer of this forms into PowerSchool.
And Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, this is something we're looking at for the beginning of the school year next year, not anything during the current school year, correct?
Yes, sir. You're correct, Dr. Houlihan. The implementation timeframe would be somewhere over the summer, but before school starts. Our goal naturally would have it by the end of this school year, have it in production so that parents would have all summer to complete the forms and put them in. It would also eliminate laborious work by our data managers to put this information manually back in and eliminate errors of typing and putting it back into PowerSchool from a paper form. So it will also help our community, but also help our staff in reducing the time it takes to update all our records. So
regarding the community, Mr. Parker, thank you for presenting the technology available. The one thing that I want to make sure that we do too is, if a family has a student in elementary, middle school, and high school, they don't have to fill out the same form or a different version of the same form from an intent purpose 3 times, right? So try to get some standardization across schools, specifically around like emergency contact information, things like that, where we can streamline the process, make it to where the first week of school is not as gruesome on parents as it is as we have made it over the past. So to try to streamline things, work with the schools, work with the principals and the leaders of the schools to standardize the form across our 53 schools that we can utilize. Now, I understand like a high school may have different requirements than an elementary school, so there may be forms specific to the different levels, but to try to standardize as much as possible across all 53 schools to streamline that first week of school efforts on parents.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr.
And
Morel.
I think that's the big lift. I think the technology part's easy.
You are correct. The technology part will be the easy solution. I've spoken with other school districts who are using this platform already in an electronic form, and they said that their biggest task was just defining the standardized form in the fields that are needed.
Yeah, I was going to say that's going to be the most challenging is we
It
have
is.
a lot of forms to complete. Which ones to become our kind of baseline,
Mhm.
Our top 5, our top 10, whatever that number would be. So, that might be the biggest challenge that we have.
It
Well,
is.
which module are we looking at again?
It's the bottom, it's the third one on the right. It's called connection forms. On the front page, you have a visual diagram, and going to the right, it's the third one
Okay.
down on the right.
Okay, and then the other question, going back to the forms, like Joe said, multiple kids, will there be a base
Mhm.
field
Yeah, parents
inside
would-
that form that you can fill out? Once you fill out one, oh, I want to add one more kid, click on a button, it will keep that base information in the form, and then you fill out the information for your second child and so on.
That is correct, Mr. Helms. As Mr. Morel alluded to, the technology part's the easy one.
Yeah.
So a parent, when they bring it up, would have their selection of 3 students. They'd fill the form out one time, it would replicate to the other students, and then immediately transfer into Power School. So what he's mentioned about emergency phone numbers and doctors and information, that would automatically update into Power School.
And going to Power School in the initial form, is there some auto verification and
Mhm.
standardization? Or
There's
some typos you can do
there is.
now on the data entry.
There's some
first
data
incident.
constraint fields that are put in, so such as you can't put a birth date of 1908,
Yeah.
it would have some constraint fields of areas,
And
and we
like
can
address, stuff
define,
like that. And-
yeah, we can define what those are.
So it's user friendly.
Yes, sir. It's the same Scribbles platform. Yes, sir. It's pretty easy. Once you get in there, it just walks you through a form. And the good part that Ms. Morris and I had a discussion on was using the Scribbles platform keeps it uniform, but it also reminds the parents that this form needs to be completed, sends it out every day and says, hey, you haven't completed this form. You need to complete this form. So it works as a reminder for our parents and keeps them on task.
I would say staying up till midnight or 1 o'clock at the beginning of school, filling out all those forms for every child. It might be worth it. So I just want to clarify, are we talking about connection forms and transfer? Because on the final page, it looks like you're asking for both.
No, sir. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Whoa.
The transfer records part is when a student transfers from one school to another. And that is something that they perform, bringing electronic forms from one school to another school. Power School already does that.
Okay, so we don't need that.
No, ma'am. So, Ms. Merrill, once they're enrolled, if they transfer after that point, the records automatically follow them in Power School.
So to do connect, so when I'm looking at the back page, I can cross through $750 a month because you're saying that Power School already does that.
Yes, ma'am, it does that.
So we would be looking at $12,000 a year and this would be ongoing every year, but that's just for 5 forms.
It's
So
just for 5
so
forms.
what's their step increase going to be if we need more than, because like you said, we have a lot of forms.
Yeah, once we define the amount of forms we have, then we can negotiate and talk to the vendor and come up with an agreeable amount to do that, all those forms.
And we know you're a good negotiator.
Yes, ma'am, I'll work hard on that and get us a great price on it, I promise.
Okay, yeah, the 5 forms makes me really nervous.
Is this information only or is it action?
Is information to let you know about it. It can turn into action, but I just
Okay.
wanted to bring it
Because
up
I
to
don't
let you
want
know.
to act on it until we know the final number of forms.
Mhm.
So.
This would
Okay.
give you some background base of information to move forward with.
What I would recommend is this is just one proposal. If the committee is comfortable moving forward, I would ask Mr. Parker and Ms. Morris to help, and this will not happen within the next month, but take some time to work with them to begin identifying the base number of forms and what those might be. And when you're ready, come back to this committee with a full proposal and the exact amount of dollars that would need to be spent for a contract to be approved by the SPIT committee, then go to the full board. We're just not there yet.
Yes, sir.
I think today we wanted the committee to know that it's on our radar. It's something we want to do for next year, but I think we've got a little bit more legwork to do before it has any action on your end.
So at least you're aware of our option and our proposal and where our efforts are focused right now.
Mr. Visor, in addition to the spend with the vendor on the technology, you're going to have some integration work to bring things to the Power School, things like that. As far as the full scope of the project and cost there, how does that work internally at UCPS? Like, are you going to be asking for, something that's like, do we capitalize this? Do we have to go with a, full capital spend? So if you do this internally, you capitalize that labor from your department, or
We do.
your labor, and you're free to use it, and it's an expense to your department. How does that work?
Yeah, that's correct. It would just be an allotment of time and priorities and within my division to define the data fields. So you would look at the form and say last name equals this in Power School. That's pretty simple. We can probably accomplish that in a day or two. It's not that much task. We already have a data dictionary of all our fields, so we can provide that to the vendor and just do some mapping, but a day or two of time, that's about it.
And this is a hosted solution, or?
Yes, it is. It's a hosted solution. It's
Okay.
software as a service.
Okay. The forms, when they get completed, where do they go? I mean,
They're stored within the Scribbles platform.
okay.
So once
I
you
know you
complete
said we
it,
have
it
plenty of
goes,
storage for
yeah.
them. How do we get them?
it goes to their data warehouse, which is built on I won't go too far, but it goes into a SQL
Yeah, yeah.
platform, and then it just transfers nightly into Power School. So it's a 24-hour lag
Okay,
between the time
okay,
the data is
gotcha.
entered to appearing in Power School.
So it's not creating a database either. It's creating just an repository of the image of the form, correct?
Correct. It just
Yeah.
captures what's put in on the form.
Okay.
Jay, why don't you do a little bit more work and then come back to the committee whenever we have a more defined proposal?
Yes, sir.
And that would then cause the committee to have some action, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, we have the transportation update with Mark Strickland and Scott Denton. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. Glad to be with you this morning. We continued our visits from the last time that we talked about going to visit schools. We've almost gotten every one of them. Some of those visits are hard to make, only because I like to be there when buses are on the campus. And so we've done all high schools, middle schools, except Sun Valley. And we've also been able to get to almost all the elementary schools. We try to get there at 7:30, 7:15 in the morning so we can talk with drivers and administrators. And our feedback's been positive thus far. I think for two reasons. One, we're looking to talk with our administrators to see what our service levels are like. They've been very pleased thus far. The other reason is I think it's important to be out there is for our drivers. Our drivers are asking for transparency and communication. They're asking for support, and I've committed to them. I'm going to be an advocate for them. And so we'll continue those visits, and won't be just a one-time round robin. We'll do those repeatedly throughout the school year to make sure we are communicating with our drivers. Needless to say, the bus driver shortage, we do still have our shortage going on, primarily due to a lack of hours. We've had the folks we've lost have found other jobs, and they have 40-hour-a-week jobs. And of course, our jobs are not paying that many hours. And of course, the hourly rate for us is $13.87 to start. Charlotte Mecklenburg just gave an increase to $15.75, so that's obviously an issue for us. We're managing the driver vacancies the best that we can, and you'll see on the next slide we'll have some information about some metrics we've been using to show how we manage that. And we did mention improving our communication. We are meeting monthly now with our bus drivers on a virtual meeting. We had our first one yesterday. We're having a second one today, and we're trying to make sure that we're very transparent and communicating with them on the things we're working on and the updates, and just trying to create value for them, make sure they know